Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jody Dublin. I'm the Associate Director of Advising and Programming, Graduate and Professional School Lead at Beyond Barnard. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about acing the grad school interview. So here's our agenda for today. We'll start with a little introduction. We'll talk about what to do before the interview to prepare. We'll begin with the grad school application timeline. We'll talk about interview goals, preparing for the interview, and then we'll go into what happens during the interview. We'll talk about the interview structure, common questions, how to answer those. And then, of course, we'll talk about what happens after the interview. I'll share a few closing thoughts and then, a little Q&A. You can also feel free to pop questions into the chat. I'm happy to answer those there as well. Okay, so let me introduce myself. As I said before, I'm Jody Dublin, she and her pronouns. I'm the Associate Director of Advising and Programs here at Beyond Barnard. I'm the Graduate and Professional School Lead, which means that my specialties are working with people who are applying to graduate and professional school, law school, business school, anything like that. I also am pretty good at doing resumes, cover letters, interview prep, mock interviews, and my drop-ins for students are Thursdays from 1 to 2 in our office. And this is just a little throwback pic of me when I was graduating from my doctoral program. Okay, so now I kind of want to get a sense of who's in the room. So can you tell me who you are? You can either unmute yourself. I'm going to pause the recording. Um, uh, here. Okay. So now that we know who's in the room, let's talk a little bit about our session goals. So the first one is to learn the purpose and structure of the grad school interview process. Next is to explore ways to prepare for a successful interview. And then third is to identify personal goals for the grad school interview, because it is kind of a two-way street, right? You're interviewing with them, but you are also interviewing them. You want to make sure that this is a good program for you. So we want to be sure to identify our goals as well. We know what their goals are. We need to know what our goals are. So let's talk a little bit about what could happen before the interview. So I want to start by talking a little bit about the grad school application timeline. So it sounds like some of you are in the process, some of you are thinking about the process. So if this is the first time you're hearing about this, I want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So it starts kind of in the summer. And this is where you are doing your little planning phase. You're going to decide on your budget and your action plan the summer before you are going through the application process, which typically most people are applying in the fall. Most PhD applications are due by December 15th. And then master's program applications can be due way into the spring of the next year. But most people tend to focus their applications during the fall, right? So you're going to take your standardized tests if you need to. You're going to be drafting your personal statements and your CV, choose and edit a writing sample. You're going to be getting in touch with your recommenders and letting them know, hey, I'm about to apply to graduate school. Would you be interested, or would you be able to write me a strong letter of recommendation? And you're going to be researching your funding options and then, doing what you need to do to get that process started. In the fall, this is a time when we are attending info sessions, reaching out to prospective advisors, grad students, and alums, finalizing those personal statements, submitting the FAFSA, and then submitting the application by the deadline. Now, here we are in winter, where we're receiving responses from schools and following given instructions. We're completing our interviews, like our friend here, who's doing some physics programs. And then if we're placed on a hold or a wait list, that's when we're talking to Beyond Barnard, we're talking to our faculty mentors to try to figure out how we can navigate that hold. In the spring, which hopefully, it's been such a long winter, Hopefully that's on its way soon, although I heard we have 6 more weeks. Spring is when you are going to be attending open houses for admitted students. And then this is decision-making time. So once you commit to an acceptance, you're going to let other people know, hey, thanks, but no thanks. I'm not coming to your school, so that some eager person who's on the wait list hopefully will be able to be admitted. And then you're going to confirm your attendance with a financial deposit by the deadline. And all of this will be, in the letter that you received once you receive your acceptances. Okay, so now let's switch and talk a little bit about interview goals. So the nice thing about the interview goals is that you and the grad program have the same goals, basically. You want to get to know each other beyond, what's virtual. So they want to get to know you beyond your application, your letters of recommendation, things like that. And you want to get to know them beyond their website or their open house. You are trying to visualize yourself there and see if it's going to be a good fit for you, right? So this is where you are really thinking about what your goals are, who you are as a person, as an academic, as a potential professional, and trying to see if this grad program is going to help you accomplish those goals. And then finally, this the interview is a good place to try to see if there are any potential red flags, right? So they want to know from you, is this person going to be, a good fit? Is there something that we need to worry about? And you are also like, is this program a good fit? Are the vibes okay? Am I going to be able to thrive, right? So these tend to be the goals for interviews. So now let's talk about research. This is a very, very, very crucial part of the interview, and we haven't even gotten to the interview yet, right? So typically when you're being asked to attend an interview, whether it's on campus or virtual, you'll be sent a schedule of the interview, and we'll talk about that in a few slides. And on that schedule, there will be names of people that you'll be meeting with. So it's going to be your job to research each of these people and start to think about who these people are in the room, right? So the first group of people that you are going to want to research is faculty. There are guaranteed to be faculty members there. Some of those people are going to be from your specific subdiscipline, some are not. Some might not even be from your discipline, right? They could be from the department, but not necessarily your particular field. So you want to research the program faculty, affiliated faculty, and you want to know their specialties, right? So not just the people that are there, but the people that are in the program, because let's say you want to work with someone and they're not going to be at the open house, you still want to be able to, converse about them, talk about their specialty, ask questions about them, things like that. Next, you want to look up the students. So typically on these grad interview days, there's going to be like a student panel, students to talk to, stuff like that. You will probably get their names. You're going to want to look them up, see if their advisor is listed, on whatever websites that they're on, because maybe those are going to be your potential advisor. And that's when you might want to start formulating a few questions to ask about what the relationship is like, what their, advising style is like, things like that. You're going to want to familiarize yourself with their academic or professional background. This is especially good, because that's a point of connection, right? If the two of you are coming from Barnard, for example, or from the same hometown or the same academic orientation, it's always nice to have a friend or somebody that you can kind of connect with. So definitely make sure that you're understanding that and know their research, right? This is going to help you orient your questions. As I said before, they're going to send you a schedule. Make sure that you are studying the schedule. Get that highlighter out, highlight, on the screen, whatever it takes. Make sure that you know that schedule inside out so that you know where you need to be and when. If you have questions, people make mistakes on schedules. Maybe they have you in two places at once. Feel free to reach out for clarification. And then also, if you need an accommodation, feel free to reach out and just let them know, hey, this is what I've got going on. How can we, change the schedule, finesse the schedule, whatever, to accommodate my needs. And then finally, you want to make sure that you are researching the program. You know this program like the back of your hand so that you can be able to formulate some questions, understand the requirements of the program, note points of interest and questions, and then, of course, you want to know about the funding, right? These are questions that you might have, that you might be formulating. So you want to make sure that you have a good understanding of the program before you go on the interview. So, next is you want to be ready to talk about yourself, right? And the first and one of the most important things that you need to be ready to talk about is your application materials. You want to make sure that you are staying on script with your application materials, right? So you need to make sure that you are studying your personal statement, studying any other writings that you've submitted. You know for sure why this program is the program that's right for you. You know your CV like the back of your hand. You need to make sure that like you are on the same page as the person that submitted that application back in September, right? If there are changes, you should be ready to talk about those as well. You want to know what you've done in the past, right? So that CV, again, you want to make sure that you are very familiar with the research that you've done, the things you presented, the techniques that you know, the methodologies that you're familiar with, all that stuff. You should be prepared to talk about it if someone asks you a question. You should know what you want to do in this program, right? So you will want to know about you'll want to be able to talk about the research that you want to do, the teaching that you might want to do, the if there's organizations on campus or off campus, all of that stuff. You should have a sense of what you want to do while you're spending the next 5 to 7 years of your life in this program. Next, you're going to want to know what you want to do professionally, right? And apart, like above that, why this program is going to be a good fit for you to do what you want to do professionally. So this is a good chance, again, to a good time to go over the program and then really pick out like, okay, this is why. These are the specific reasons why for my specific occupation that I want to do when I graduate. You should also know your potential areas of growth, improvement, and challenge, right? What are your strengths and weaknesses is a very popular question in interviews. Grad school interviews are no different. So you want to make sure that you know what your areas are that need a little bit of growth and need a little bit of tweaking. Areas that maybe are going to make this program challenging for you. You should know what they are and be prepared to talk about them. And then finally, and most importantly, you should know your research interests like the back of your hand. You should know how you might pursue them, and you should be able to talk about them in a succinct way. So I found this quote when I was doing my research for this presentation, and I thought that it really resonated with me. And it says, what separates good interviewees from exceptional interviewees is the level of preparation and specifically the ability to discuss one's research interests and prior research confidently and clearly. Right. And what I really like about this is that it's not saying like you need to have had 1,000 years of being in the lab or 1,500 publications or whatever. You need to be able to talk about what is meaningful to you, which is your research, and try to sell that to other folks. Like get them on board with your level of passion for your research. So to do that, one might want to do an elevator pitch. And an elevator pitch for the uninitiated is basically like the short form summary of your academic and professional career up to this point. And the reason that it's called an elevator pitch is that the premise is, let's say you are in an elevator with, name whoever person that you might want to work with, either in the future, academically, do research with, whatever. And you just have that time between when the two of you get into the elevator and when you get to where you're going to be able to pitch yourself, right? So it's very short, it's succinct, and it's really walk me through the highlights of your CV, right? So again, going back to that research piece, you really need to have that tied up. You need to be able to say your research in, a number of different ways pretty quickly. You want to think about your background as a narrative, right? So you want to draw a thread between from, your early influences and whatever your field is to now. And maybe that includes a little bit of sidestepping or whatever, but you are in charge of creating that narrative and telling a story that makes sense to you and the folks that you're going to be telling that story to. So, what you want to do is talk about your accomplishments and relevant experience. And you're balancing detail overload with being too vague, right? So, you want to sprinkle in just the right amount of details to get your point across without like being boring, right? And you don't want to assume that anybody knows your CV in detail. There's going to be different people coming in, and especially at the grad school level, things are a lot more similar than they are different. So you want to make sure that you are talking about your specific circumstance, and helping them understand who you are. And one thing I would recommend is practicing different versions for different situations, different versions of your elevator pitch for different situations. So you're going to need an elevator pitch for when you're just going around the room and telling who you are and why you're here. You're going to need one for when you talk to your advisor, your potential advisor. You're going to need one for when you're at the social later on and you're just meeting other people that are in the department. So you want to play around with having a few elevator pitches with various levels of details, various things that you want to highlight and things like that for the interview weekend. So the next thing that we want to prepare for is having questions for them. As I said at the beginning of this interview is as much for them as it is for you. You want to make sure that you are making as informed of a decision as you can for the next 5 to 7 years, right? This is a very big investment for both of you. It's a big investment for them money wise, right? They're paying for you to be with them for this long amount of time. But also for you, this is a big investment time wise. So you want to make sure that this is going to be the right place, the right fit, to the extent that you're able to. So I want you to think about preparing questions for two different groups of people. First of all, of course, faculty. So you want to talk to them about their research, their role in the program. Are they the chair? Are they the dean of graduate studies? Whatever. You want to have some questions about that, obviously, after you've done your research. You want to ask about your potential role in their research. You want to ask about like what's going on in the lab. Is there a place for me? Maybe there's not a place for me next year, but could there be a place for me in the future, right? You want to ask about opportunities to present. So for most people, the PhD is a pathway to an academic career, and presenting and writing research and things like that is really crucial to having a successful academic career. So you want to be able to have those opportunities while you're a graduate student. So you might want to ask them a little bit about when they've presented with their grad students. If they are not presenting with their grad students, maybe that's a red flag because it's possible that this person is not going to be, a strong mentor for an early career professional. So that's one thing to look out for. You want to ask about how advising works and what happens if you need to change advisors. Are you going to be my academic advisor? Also, you need to know a little bit about the advising situation. You might want to also know their mentorship style/advising style, meeting frequency, expectations for availability, etc. If you are a person that is like super independent and you only need to check in with somebody maybe once a semester or so, like, and this person's like, no, I expect to check in with my advisees every 2 weeks. I need to know, then maybe that relationship is not going to work all the way. Maybe that's something that you need to negotiate and find a place in the middle. But you want to have a sense of what they're coming to the table with and what their style is going to be. And then if you're going to be in a lab, you want to know the composition of the lab, right? You want to know how many undergrads are in there, how many grads, how many postdocs, what's the rotation, like what's the cleaning role? You want to know what their role is in the lab and what your role could be in the lab as well. So, as I said before, you're going to be meeting with students in a lot of different arenas. Sometimes uh, schools invite grad students to host visiting students in their homes. Sometimes it's like just like a dinner and then a social or a panel, things like that. So you're going to have hopefully a lot of opportunities to meet with students. So you want to make sure that you are asking them tons of questions as well because you're going to be a student, right? So you want to know about their research, see if it dovetails with yours. You want to know about working with their advisor. So maybe you can get a sense, even if it's not your advisor, you can kind of get a sense of the department, or maybe this is a potential advisor or a committee member or somebody that you could work with on another project. You definitely want to get, a sense of their relationship. Student life, are they involved on campus? Campus climate, right? We want to know, is this a friendly climate? What are some of the issues? What are some of the good things? What are some of the, more challenging things? We want to find out about that. Their participation in conferences. So, as I said before, it's super important to have opportunities to present and to present your work as a graduate student. So, you're going to want to know, like, is there funding for that? Are there opportunities? Is a department open to that? Do they encourage that? On the same note, funding opportunities, right? So you probably will know about a grad student stipend, but maybe there's opportunities for more money. Again, opportunities to attend conferences or workshops or things like that. What is the money situation there? Publishing opportunities, teaching and work. Sometimes for some schools, like teaching is required right away. For some schools, they don't require that. So you want to know what that's about. Life outside of campus, of course, you're going to be a whole person as a grad student. It's not as campus bound as being undergrad. So you're going to want to get a sense if you're leaving, New York City, what is it like in this place that you're going to? Like, what are the vibes? What's the housing situation? You probably are not going to be living on campus for the whole time. So, like, is it easy to find an apartment? What's the transportation looking like? What's it like in the summer? Does it completely empty out or are folks still here? Right. So, you want to get a sense of like what this place is like as a resident and not just a student. At the same time, you want to know lab culture. You want to know program red flags. Like, definitely ask that, gently. Maybe one way to ask that is like, what is one thing that you wish you knew before you applied? That could be a way to get around that. You're going to want to know about program support if you have health issues, right? We all have been through, COVID, right? We've been through a lot of different things. Is the program going to be supportive if you have a chronic or acute illness, pregnancy, disability, et cetera, right? We want to know these things. Again, this program is a longer term program than an undergrad. So, a lot of life can happen in 5 to 7 years. So we want to know that. Is there a grad student union on campus? What are they up to? What are the things that they're fighting? Are there sort of things bubbling right now that I should be aware of? And then finally, getting help, right? If you need help academically, financially, with housing, whatever, like what's the help situation here? Is it generally easy to find help? What's the situation? It's really great to get that from a student because, again, you're going to be a student. They're talking from the student perspective. Okay, so let's talk about physical logistics of the interview. If you're invited to a virtual interview, you want to do the same, it's the same kind of setup if you were doing it for, a job. You want somewhere that's quiet and comfortable for the duration of the time that you're going to be online. That could be quite a few hours. So you want to make sure that, if you have a roommate or whatever, that you've paid them off so that they can be out of the room for the time being or, whatever you need to be. Um, you want to dress up, you want to wear something professional on the top, you know, could be a jacket, could be just a nice top, whatever it is, just make sure it looks clean and neat. No wrinkles, those definitely can be seen on camera. So you want to make sure that you're hitting it with the steamer or an iron or whatever beforehand if you need to. Close all unneeded tabs. Now, this is really close to me. I'm a tab queen. I love having a lot of tabs open, but that can strain the internet. So before you log on, make sure that you're closing your tabs so that you are not taking up a lot of bandwidth, and don't risk getting logged off. And then you want to have a notebook for notes or questions, and so that you can avoid typing on your laptop because that sound is a little tough sometimes. So again, you want to keep nearby your notebook, your notes for yourself, a pen or multiple pens, your CV, and some water. It can be a long day, and when you have to talk a lot, this is your best friend. So if it's going to be an in-person situation, you want to make sure that you're communicating with the coordinators to make travel arrangements in a timely manner. If they're coordinating the travel, you want to make sure that you are, sending everything to them with enough time to make sure that all the arrangements are set up. You're clarifying who will be paying if that's not clear. So typically they will tell you, like, if they're arranging the travel, then they're usually paying. If they're not, then, they'll let you know. If there's a question, definitely ask. A lot of times, if they're not explicit, there might be a reimbursement kind of situation. So you just want to make sure that you know that up front. Again, share those accommodation needs. If you need an accommodation, let them know. Bring an outfit for each day. Alts, if possible, just in case, you spill something, you get sweaty. If you're like me, like you put it on and you're like, oh no. Tuesday, Jody thought that would be a good idea, but this is Wednesday, Jody, and Wednesday, Jody does not think that's a good idea, right? You want to bring a couple of alts just in case. Comfortable footwear. A lot of times these interviews include tours. So you want to make sure that if you need to walk around on cobblestones, up hills, in snow, whatever, that your feet are nice and comfy because nothing is worse than having uncomfy feet. And then you want to dress for the weather, right? So make sure that you're looking up, the forecast in advance, and then, maybe dressing for maybe 5 to 10 degrees on either side, just in case. And then you want to carry some hard copies of your materials for yourself, personal statements, CV, writing sample, so that you can review those and have those just in case you need to reference them. And then when you get to the venue, wherever it's going to be, the pickup point on campus, whatever, you want to arrive about 10 minutes early so that you're not too early and you're definitely not late. Okay, so now we've arrived at the interview. All right, congratulations on getting to this point. So this is a sample PhD student visit schedule. Um, a lot of schedules kind of look like this. Sometimes they're spread over a couple of days, but they're basically kind of packed exactly like this. So, 8 to 8:15, you got to be downstairs dressed to walk to campus. 8:30, breakfast with prospective students and meet and greet. 9:15, 10, it's all day meeting with a lot of different kinds of people. And it's usually a mix of one-on-one interviews, group interviews, panels, meals, social events, and tours. So again, it can be a lot, right? But we'll talk about how to deal with that in a little bit. You're going to be meeting with faculty, students, and program staff. So again, you want to make sure that you have your questions ready, and it could be spread out over a couple of days, especially if it's one that you have to fly in for. There might be like a dinner. You might fly in the afternoon, and then there's a dinner, and then the next day is, all day stuff, and then, then you leave, right? So it could be spread out over a couple of days. This is an example of a 1 day agenda. And then here are some typical interview questions. Now, they're going to sound pretty familiar because they're kind of similar to what you might have been asked for a lab position, or even when you were writing your personal statement, right? They want to know, who are you? What are you doing here? What do you want to do here? And what do you want to do in the future, right? So again, tell me about your research interests. You need to know this like backwards and forwards. Who are you interested in working with? What are some projects that you're interested in? You also are going to want to know a little bit about what's going on in your field, right? What are the major issues in this field? So you want to get ready to talk about a couple of talking points of, things that might have been in the news lately. Maybe there's a new discovery. Maybe that school just, got money for something. Like you want to make sure that you have a little bit of a sense of like what's going on right now so that you can talk about it. You're going to want to talk about things like failure, things like group work, things like what are your challenges, about your teaching experience, because a lot of times grad students are going to be expected to teach. So you want to talk a little bit about that. And then like, what's your interest? Like, what is driving your interest? Like, PhDs are notoriously difficult, right? So they want to know when the going gets tough, like what is grounding you? What is keeping you here? So these are some typical interview questions. You can find tons of them all over the internet. I recommend, Reddit has a really great, sometimes grad school admissions subreddit that has tons of interview questions. And then there are tons of interview questions sort of all over the internet. For my psychology person, the APA has like a whole grad school guide that is really great and has lots of information about preparing for grad school interviews. So I highly recommend, looking for these grad school guides in professional organizations of your specific subfields or your specific academic area. So here are some interview tips. First and foremost, practice, 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 right? Practice, but don't sound like a robot. So make sure that you feel comfortable answering these questions. Practice with a friend. You can come here to be on Barnard and practice with one of us, a roommate, whoever. Just make sure that you're practicing. Every part of the interview is the interview, right? So as soon as you sort of, if somebody's meeting you at the airport, that's when the interview starts. And it doesn't stop until you are back on the plane, right? So the driver that's picking you up could be, they could ask that person about, how you were. The informal conversations that you could be having with students, they might be, talking a little bit about what their impressions were when the interview wrap-ups happen. So you want to make sure that you're kind of on your P's and Q's for the whole time that you're on your interview trip, whether it's a virtual or in person. Be polite, be professional, and most of all, be yourself. They want you, right? They picked your application out of the hundreds that they received because they want to get to know you and they want to talk to you. So it is okay to be yourself in this moment, right? They want to get to know you. Be prepared to discuss anything on your application or anything a recommender might have discussed in their letter. So let's say you took a class sophomore year and your recommender talks about this paper that you wrote and how impressed they were. You need to be prepared to talk about this thing that you did, a million years ago, right? You need to be prepared to discuss anything that's on your CV, anything like that. It is okay to repeat yourself. You have to. Anytime that you're going to a new interview, it's going to be new people. Even if there's one new person and everybody else is old, this is going to be the first time that this person is going to hear this. So it is okay to repeat yourself, say the same things. That's fine. Make sure that you're reiterating your strengths and be ready to discuss your weaknesses. Pace yourself. So take bio breaks as needed. So bring that water, go to the bathroom, stretch your legs, walk around, go outside, get some fresh air, whatever you need, because these days can be a little tricky and a little long, and you have to kind of be refreshed throughout the whole thing. So, make sure that you're taking care of yourself. A lot of times, these interview weekends include either a dinner or a social where alcohol is being served. There's I think a little bit of like debate whether like you should not drink or whatever. Whatever you do, just make sure that you're doing it in moderation. You know yourself. So make sure that you are drinking less than you usually do so that you're clear and you're in control. Um, and remember also, you are interviewing them. Ask questions that matter to you. Okay, you are the one that's making the final decision. So you should be making sure that you're asking the questions that matter. So, like, if you are a person of color and you are curious about that, make sure that you're asking about that, right? You should be asking about the things that are going to help you feel comfortable in making a choice for, this next important stage of your life. And then finally, know your audience and speak to them. Some people in the interview are going to be subject matter experts, the same subject matter that you're in. But then there's going to be like, staff people that might not know anything about this. You want to make sure that you're able to speak to a lot of different kinds of people in ways that make sense for all of them. All right. So after the interview, the first thing that you're going to want to do is reflect on your experience while it's still fresh. So this could be on the plane. This could be, after you've turned off the Zoom, whatever. Get that notebook out, get that Google Doc open and start writing. What did you like? What did you dislike? What was exciting to you? What worried you? Could you see yourself living in this city, town, state, country? Could you see yourself thriving in this academic community? So think about things like the facilities, right? How was the lab? How was the library? You're going to be spending a lot of time in the library. How was that? Are they able to get the materials that you need if you're not there? Every place is not New York City, right? So like, are you going to be able to get the things that you need to do the work that you want to do? And if you're not sure, how can you get the answers to those questions? So I definitely recommend reflecting, especially if you have like more than one interview, because they can kind of start getting jumbled up. So you want to reflect right away. And then next, you want to make sure that you're showing some gratitude. So send thank you notes to your interviewers, hosts, and people who coordinated your visit or interview. And in those notes, you want to share a little bit about what resonated with you. So, maybe you could say something like, I want to thank you for sharing your experience of being on the grad student council. It was really great to hear about, whatever, right? You want to share a little bit so that they know that you were listening and paying attention. And then showing gratitude doesn't just, show gratitude, but it also reinforces your interest in the program. It's another way for you to really be like, hey, like being here just reaffirmed my interest. Like I can see myself here. Thank you for spending time with me. So yes, it's a time-consuming step, especially if you're meeting with a lot of different people, but it's also, a step that can maybe separate you from someone else if they're, trying to decide. All right, here are some final thoughts. So the interview process is one of the last parts of the grad school admissions process. Congratulations on making it basically to the end. You should receive a decision shortly after your interview. We're talking within a couple of weeks, right? So you're really in the home stretch if you're at the grad school admissions, at the grad school interview stage. Don't prep alone. Reach out to me on Barnard, a PI, a friend, mentor, et cetera, et cetera. Make sure that you're practicing with someone. Don't be afraid to ask questions if something doesn't make sense to you. So that could be at any point in the interview. That could be as you're preparing in the interview day, after the interview. If you are like, in the airport and you're like, wait a second, these things are not adding up. Like, make sure that you ask those questions. It's all about fit at the grad school level, right? Make sure that this program fits your needs. Think professionally, personally, financially, academically. Make sure that it's ticking all those boxes. And then you can make the most of your visit. If you're visiting somewhere, try to schedule meetings with other faculty if you're able to, explore the neighborhood where the school is, partake in entertainment, etc. Right? This is a chance for you to kind of fanfic yourself in this place. What would it be like to live in Chicago? What would it be like to live in Tempe, Arizona? I don't know. Let's see. What's the Trader Joe's like? Take some time to explore, right? And then finally, when everything is all said and done, treat yourself. We all deserve a little treat, especially because this is a really intense process. You're interviewing, you're researching, you're, traveling maybe. You're really putting yourself out there in a way that you're not putting yourself out there usually. So like treat yourself a little, draw yourself a bubble bath, get a little ice cream, go for a nice walk, call, your bestie, whatever. Treat yourself in a way that makes sense for you. All right, so we've reached the end. Do we have any questions?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
I feel like when I'm practicing for interviews, like this sounds maybe weird because the interview is all speaking, but like the most difficult part for me is the speaking part. Like I
Hmm.
never feel like I'm really in a prepared enough place to like ask someone like, would you mock interview me? Because I don't want to waste their time. Or like even when I'm, in my room alone and like wanting to practice, it doesn't feel like the right type of preparation because it's like there's no one else there and I'm not really like, sorry, there's like a really loud fan in the back. Um, I was just wondering if you had any tips about getting over that initial stage of like